So let me talk about something pretty basic but very important, and that is stringing up your spinning reels with line. So what I'm going to do is actually end up tying on Fireline to almost all of my jigging and spinning reels. 10-pound test, a little bit heavier for things like shivering or maybe blade baits, things like that. I'm going to go all the way down to maybe 6-pound Fireline if I'm just pitching jigs with a rod. So the first thing I'm going to do is put some backing on the reel. The reason you do that is because Fireline is actually very slippery, so it will actually turn on the spool itself. So you want to put some kind of either mono or fluorocarbon, just really anything you got left over, because you're not actually going to fish this. So what I'm going to do is tie this to the reel here. What I like to do is just something real simple, and that is an overhand knot. And I just simply pull that pretty tight on the spool there. And then I tie a clinch knot. So I just go around the main line about 4 times and back through the loop at the bottom here. And then just make sure you only pull on the main line there and just pull that tight. And that will cinch up tight enough that you can then spool this right onto the spool. And now just spool on, I don't know, I mean 6, 8, 10 feet of line. It doesn't take that much to get a good grip on that spool. Just a few turns is what I do. Now you can actually fill this up quite a bit with backing if you want. Like if you really don't need it all full of Fireline, you could just fill it halfway up if you want to change your line a little bit more often. But I find that Fireline is so durable, a lot of times I'll fill that spool all the way up, so that as I'm fishing, if I get some break-offs or some wind knots or something where I have to retie, I have plenty of line on my spool to keep fishing all the way down to the bottom if I want to. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is simply splice the Fireline. Again, 10-pound test in this case. Could go down to 6 or whatever. You tie them all the same. I'm going to just use the standard splicing knot here. Basically, you loop your monofilament here. You're going to put your Fireline through it, and then you're going to go about 12 wraps around that loop of fluorocarbon or monofilament or whatever spare line you've got down there. This is going to be the same knot you use to tie your leaders on. So there we've got the 10 wraps around the loop of monofilament, the backing line. And then what you want to do is look which way that goes through the loop first. So it's going through this way. So I'm going to just take this tag line and go through the same way. And here's real key, kind of tighten it up just a little bit with all 4 lines, but then when you're really going to pull it tight, just use the 2 main lines. Wet it a little bit and pull that tight. So that's just your basic snell knot there. Now what I'm going to do is just real simply fill this spool up, and I'll show you about how full I'm going to want to do it. One little thing you got to remember is when you're spooling line, you always want that line coming counterclockwise off the top of the spool for a spinning reel. Just going to fill this up. I am keeping a little bit of a tension up here, not overly tense, but you don't want that going on loose at all. You don't want any little loops of line there. And what we're going to do is fill these spools up about as far as you can without the line jumping off the top. And what I mean by that is I'm going to leave about maybe 1/8 of an inch, and I'll show you here in a second. So what I'm going to leave is about 1/8 of an inch between where my line is and the edge of my spool there. That way, especially when I first spool up, it's really going to cast good, but I can fish this quite a ways down and it's still going to be flying off that reel real nice, get you a nice long cast. So that's pretty much it. You're now going to, tie whatever leader on here. If I'm doing shiver minnows or heavier stuff, I'm going to use a 15-pound test fluorocarbon leader. If I'm doing that jigging, I'm going to go down maybe to a 10 or even an 8-pound test leader. But that's just that same splice knot again. So real important to spool them up right. But once you do it with Fireline, it's going to fish a long time.